Welcome, everyone. We are very excited to launch the trilogy. It's now complete. And I'm just going to start by introducing Sonia and Marcia, and then have some questions, and then people can join in with more questions. And I would have liked to hold up the trilogy, but I read it on an ebook thing, so I'm sorry about that. But all right, so Sonia Nimr is a Palestinian writer, translator, academic. She was born in Jenin, was active in student struggles against Israeli occupation during her time at Birzeit University, and then subsequently spent 3 years in jail. During that time, she went to the UK after this and has a PhD in oral history from Exeter University. She began writing officially in the 70s, and in the 90s was imprisoned once again. And she began writing children's stories while incarcerated, and her work was actually confiscated by Israeli officials. And her first publication was in 2003, a co-written book with Elizabeth Laird called A Little Piece of Ground, which is the story of the occupation through the perspective of a young boy. And it received a lot of acclaim on publication. And then just last year, 20 years later, it was in the news again because they pulled the book off of the school curriculum in the state of New Jersey in the US. And which, of course, speaks to the political nature and the resistant nature of the book, of course. She's also the author of The Story That Begins and Ends in Lies, Ghaddar the Ghoul, and Other Palestinian Stories. And then Marcia comes into the picture as the translator of Wondrous Journeys to Strange Lands. And then Marcia also goes on to translate the amazing, inspiring Thunderbird Trilogy, published by the University of Texas Press. And it tells the story of Noor, a time-traveling Palestinian girl with magical powers to save the world, which she does. And then a quick intro for Marcia Lynx Qualey. She's an editor, writer, translator, whose focus has been on Arabic literature and translation. She founded the incredibly important online initiative Arablit in 2009, and then it expanded and is now a publishing cooperative that puts out the print magazine Arablit quarterly as well. She's the co-founder of World Kidlit, and also co-hosts the Bulak podcast. So Marcia is also the force behind the Coalition Publishers for Palestine, which is a global collective of more than 400 publishers who stand for justice, freedom of expression, and the power of the written word in solidarity with the people of Palestine. And this came into being last year. Okay, so welcome both. It's such an absolute honor to be able to talk to you. And also it feels super urgent because we are in this horrifying moment as we watch this genocide keeps going. And I found it really difficult actually to read the Thunderbird Trilogy because of what the Israeli occupation is doing to the children and the deliberate and the relentless slaughter of babies and kids. And I felt like hope was a scarce commodity. But I want to thank you, Sonia, and you, Marcia, as well, for offering hope through the story and the adventures of empowered, courageous, vibrant young Noor. So I'm going to ask my first question. Sonia, you are an activist. You always claim to be a feminist, and you've been known to say that your work is a mission in service of or on behalf of Palestinian children. So I just wanted to ask you to say a little bit more about that. Why do you feel that it is imperative to focus on children, and more importantly, why is a young girl, a 14-year-old girl, a protagonist of Thunderbird? And then Marcia, maybe after she's done, you can also talk a little bit about your focus on kids and World Kidlit, the project, and also why you chose to translate Sonia's works in particular, because you call yourself an occasional translator. It's not so occasional.
Okay. Actually, you said the words. You said empowerment, you said hope, and I can add joy as well. But let me explain. It is so difficult. It's so hard to grow up in Palestine as a child. It is so difficult not to see beyond the horizon. It's so difficult to be between walls. You know, one of my son's my son is an adult now, but his first memory was seeing soldiers stepping on the neck of his dad with their soldier, with their army boots, pointing their guns at him. This is one of the earliest memories of my son. This is something which is not very happy to grow up with. It is something very difficult to grow up with. And I can't imagine now how children in Gaza, apart from the 18,000 who were genocide, were killed in Gaza, I can't imagine a child looking for a piece of bread. This is so unbelievably horrifying. But at the same time, what can I do as a writer? I mean, I wrote the books before Gaza. Now, I don't think I can write about Gaza. Maybe it will take a long time before I'll be able actually to see and absorb what's going on, let alone write about it. But at the same time, thinking of all these children who actually they need empowerment. They need someone to tell them that, a pat on the shoulder, tell them that, you're okay, it's going to be okay. The girl in the story, she's going to win the battle after all. There is hope in the horizon, because this is what they need to hear. They don't want to hear about what they live because they live it. They don't want a writer to tell them, about war and about tanks and about killing. They want a writer to tell them, it's okay, it's okay. There is hope. Things will happen at the end. And I think this is one of the things I try to do. So basically, if I want to say it in 3 words, and then we talk about, I'm getting emotional now. If we talk about later on, I have only 3 words now to say about my books. It's just to give them joy, to give them hope, and to give them empowerment. If I did that, it means that I did my mission as a writer, at least for now.
Thank you.
That's so beautiful. And I just want to say that Sonia knows this, but I recently got an email from a rehabilitation hospital in Slovenia where they're working with some kids who were evacuated from Gaza who are paralyzed in very poor shape. And they asked me, could you send us some PD, they don't have books for this age. Could you possibly send us the PDFs of the Arabic? We'll just print out one Arabic book, one copy of each of the Thunderbird books and circulate it among the kids in the hospital, because they need something, some future horizon that is not the now.
Yeah, absolutely. Sonia, can I ask you, sorry, not Sonia, Marcia, can I ask you about your kind of intro to or interest? How did it begin with, children's literature, speculative fiction? I know you run something called World Kid Lit, if you want to tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so I guess my interest in literature for young readers started when I had kids, and at first I found it very difficult to find picture books in Arabic that would interest my kids. If you went to like a stationery store where you could find picture books, you would find extremely moralizing and very boring and word dense picture books. So I, started going to book fairs, Arabic book fairs, and going kind of stand to figure out what was going on. In 2010, maybe this prize at Salat Award for Arabic Children's Literature opened up, and Wondrous Journeys won it in, I don't know,
2014.
Okay, 2014. And so I read it because because there it was. And I absolutely loved it. And I think that Sonia was maybe at the fair that year. And so I was able to sit down and talk to her. And I was remembering how you had told me that you had started this idea of writing for children when you were in prison. And if I'm allowed to ask a question, I would like to kind of recall that. And I guess, so when I say occasional translator, what I'm interested in is doing the work that other people aren't doing. Of course, there's lots of people interested in translating Adenia Shibli's next book, right? And there's a high prestige around literature for grown-ups, but I didn't find the same passionate interest in translating literature for young readers, which I love very much. And I feel that a good children's book is good for all ages. And that it's very hard to write a good book for adolescents, for teens. And so I wanted to bring this into English. I also felt, there's a paucity of Palestinian stories for young readers, and a sort of a strong censorship push. The idea is that Palestinian literature, it's political in sort of its very nature, and thus it's okay for grown-ups, but not for, we got to keep it away from kids for somehow. So I wanted to be a part of bringing these beautiful stories, empowering, joyful, hopeful stories to young people, so that they too could travel to other places. And so my interest in World Kid Lit in general is in these lesser translated pathways, is in bringing literature and translation to young people in the United States and the UK and elsewhere who are English speaking.
Is there, Sonia, were you the kind of pioneer for this genre for Palestinian writing, or are there others, or if there haven't been, has it started to grow? Of course, it still belongs in the global sort of industry. It's still marginalized, censored, all those kinds of things. But, in general, have you seen this genre expand more? Have you been the person who started it, or were you reading somebody that inspired you to write these?
To start with, I think writing novels, if you like, for young adults in Palestine, I think I was the first. But remember, we're under occupation and people were, occupied with so many other things. But on the other hand, I noticed that there is a huge amount of translated books. For example, today, if you go to any bookshop, you can find Harry Potter in Arabic, and Lord of the Rings in Arabic or whatever. And I was thinking that I think children in Palestine need to read something of their own, from their own culture, and yet not too much into the culture, if you know what I mean. Something that they are familiar with, and yet if you talk about Palestinian culture, I'm not going to talk about dabke and about embroidery. Or about tanks for that matter. So I'm going to talk about concerns and maybe fantasy that of their own. And this is how it started. I have been reading children books since, I don't know, since forever. I enjoy children books and novels and illustrated books. I think they are a world of their own, and it's something really wonderful and fantastic about children books. And perhaps that's why, being a political prisoner, one would expect me to write something serious, which I did. I did write something, adult, if you like, or, for adults. It all was confiscated. I enjoyed writing children stories. And this is, I think, where it all began.
Do you think And Marcia, this is for you too in the translator position. Do you think that because it's children's books, it slips by like some kind of, I don't want to use the word censorship, but some sort of scrutiny that would be given to adult? Is that an advantage of a
No,
children's book, or does it get worse?
absolute opposite, the absolute opposite. Like, like if,
Great.
if you read, like Rabia Al-Amadin has this new book, which was a speech out, Comforting Myths, where he talks about what is a political book and what gets labeled a political book. And he recalls being on a panel for An Unnecessary Woman on political. And there's like, if you've read An Unnecessary Woman, there's what's the politics there? An elderly woman is translating some books. I don't know. But he said, basically, the politics was because it's an Arab book, right? So what gets classified as a political novel is often simply because it is something written outside of the dominant culture, right? And so because if something is labeled a political novel, okay, let's say Enter Ghosts by Isabel Ahmad is labeled a political novel. It's still okay for me to read it. I'm a full grown up. I'm allowed to make my own decisions for myself and read this book. But if, you know, to put this on a school curriculum and indoctrinate our children, you know, so there's an enormous pushback, not even just, you know, picture books that are whatever Hannah Mushabak of interlinked books had a very like My Father's Homeland, a book about just about being a second generation Palestinian growing up in the United States. And she said it's been pulled from curriculum. So I think my feeling is that it's that there is no slippage whatsoever, that there's the gatekeepers are really attempting to keep what they deem as political books away from young people.
Yeah. I mean,
But
art
this,
books.
I think,
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go
No,
ahead.
I wanted to say that this is a political decision to decide that this book is political. And we have always, as Palestinians, we have always been seen as political people. Nobody saw us as humans that we love and we hate and we, you know, climb a wall and climb a tree. And this assumption, I think, makes any book from Palestine as a political book. This is how it's classified. Therefore, a no book. I remember when I first wrote my two books based on folklore, on Palestinian folklore, and I was in London. I was rejected right out by 8 different publishing houses because that was in the early 90s, and you know, I'm a Palestinian. I'm talking about Palestinian folktales. So this is how we were labeled. But on the other hand, there is something which I would like to say. There is always something that the West or the whites are better at writing. They're better at civilization. They're better in literature. They're better in art. I'm sorry to say this, but you know, this is the attitude. I mean, let me tell you an anecdote, which has nothing to do with writing, but I used to work at the British Museum as an education officer. And at some time, I had to give lectures on Arab women in the lecture hall, which is huge, you know, lofty, big British Museum kind of hall. So, and I was very nervous. I was scared, actually, because this is my first time I'm going to give a lecture to this kind of audience. So some of them are specialists, actually. So lights went off, the screen came on, and then I started, and I was thinking, maybe I should tell a joke to make me feel better. So first thing, I started with a joke. And can you imagine the no expression whatsoever on their faces? Nothing whatsoever, not funny, not hate, nothing whatsoever. Because they assumed that if I'm not British, I cannot tell jokes. This is, I think, what Marsha did not say about Arabic literature. And that's why perhaps if we go back to the trilogy, that's why I made Noor save the world.
Yeah, great. It reminds me actually of something I had forgotten. The Kenyan writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o wrote, had these set of lectures that he turned into the book Decolonizing the Mind. And what's interesting is that one of the big insights he has in that book, other than thinking about native language and mother tongue, is children's books. And one of the things he realizes, what are we reading? We're reading whatever now, Harry Potter, which is just like, so it's like, that's where it has to start, not just the language part, but also what the kids should read. And I agree very much this idea that, yes, it shouldn't be only about that culture. They should also be able to travel out, imagine, be part of some kind of a large, exciting universe, which is what Noor does. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the trilogy itself. So she's doing this kind of time traveling, and her superpower is to be able to start fires, which she can't, for whoever hasn't read it. So I just, and the way you're talking about it, you're also talking a lot about the pedagogical purpose of doing this, that you want to teach something to the kids about their own culture, to teach, of course, adults who read that. And I know that this is very much an engagement with history. There are moments in time that Noor goes back to. And I just wanted to know how you chose those moments in history. It's almost, I think Noor travels back 1400 years or something like that. Where did you pick those particular moments?
To start with, because for who did not read the book, Noor has to save the world by bringing 4 feathers from the phoenix before it burns, just the moment it burns. But according to legends, the phoenix burns every 500 years, which means that she has to go back every 500 years. Not exactly 500 years. So I picked a time where first time is when the Mamluks were leaving and the Ottomans were coming in. What my point was at that very moment in history is that there is nothing worse than a defeated army. The defeated army becomes more vicious and becomes more genocidal. And we see that now. I mean, every time they've been hit in Gaza or in South Lebanon, they become more vicious against civilians. So I wanted to mention that period of history, and maybe to say that there is nothing worse than a defeated army, because they become very, very horrible. And that first part of the history, if you like. So she goes back another 500 years, which means that she had to go to the Crusades. And this is another period of dark period, actually, in our history. And there were a few points that I wanted to mention in that book, or points I want people to note. To start with, I did not start that period of time exactly when Salah ad-Din saved, the day. I started actually 10 years earlier when he was defeated. And then he came back. I wanted to say something. There is no miracles. Something we have to do. Maybe we have to be defeated a few times before we win. But eventually we win. This is one thing. The other thing, Salah ad-Din did not win on his own and with his own army coming from all the way from Damascus. There were resistance. There is always resistance. When there is occupation, there is always resistance. And this is the other point I wanted to to mention. The third point I wanted to mention, and it is true actually in history, that the Crusades burned all the manuscripts and all the books, almost all books, and all these sciences, all these, literature in these books. And there is another thing. When you have occupation, they need to obliterate, they need to kill your culture to be able to win over you. And this is one point I wanted actually to, for kids to get, is that first we need to fight for our culture. And this is perhaps why I made Noor and the resistance movement save the books from the mosque in this period. The third period is she went back another 500 years, and this is when Jerusalem was under siege by Muslims. So Jerusalem now is a Christian town because it's during the Byzantine period. Why did I pick that period of time? Because kids in the Arab world, generally speaking, now what they're taught at schools is that history began with Islam. No, thank you. I mean, history was there. History did not begin by Islam in Palestine. I mean, Palestine has a civilization of 12,000 years before that, from the Natufian all through the history. So I wanted to tell the kids that once Jerusalem was a Christian, because this is another thing which is, let me connect it with another thing, if I may. Israel burned and demolished 3 churches in Gaza completely, and some of them are ancient churches, very old churches. Israel keeps saying that there are no Christians in Gaza. Israel keeps saying that there are no Christians in Palestine. Simply because, you can't kill Christians, but it's okay to kill Muslims because Muslims are terrorists. So this is one thing that I wanted to say, that Palestine was Christian. And before that, we worshipped Jupiter because we were under the Romans. So this is another point that I wanted to mention in that particular period of time before Muslims entered Jerusalem and negotiated, taking the town from the head of the church.
Yeah.
Why did you choose this particular moment when they are coming to negotiate, when there is a kind of a meeting between Christians and Muslims?
Because there is always this assumption, especially when you translate a book, and there is always assumption that Muslims are violent. All these Orientalists from Bernard Lewis and all these guys who always try to make you a terrorist simply because you're a Muslim, and this is a problem. So what I wanted to say that yes, they laid siege on Jerusalem, but finally they entered Jerusalem with negotiations, with talking, and they did not have a bloodshed compared to the Crusades 500 years later, who came and they literally slaughtered everyone in Jerusalem. Even Christians who went and hid in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but still they were slaughtered inside the mosque. So there are, I didn't want to say that deliberately, but you can get these messages also through the books. And that's why I picked that particular period of time.
Absolutely. The other message is also in the final book is that if you don't have weapons, if you don't have, big armies, kind of make do with what you have. And I love that. I love that that moment for Noor when she really realizes, that there are these hidden skills that she can utilize and defeat the enemy. Marsha, was it hard to translate all these moments in time, and is it written in a way in Arabic that is complicated? Does the language shift? What were the challenges for you with this?
I mean, so to me, the biggest complication was that the child reader who's reading it in Arabic knows these characters and knows these moments in history from a very different way too. If for book 2, which to me is the funniest book, you know, a child reader who's reading in English often will have heard of the Crusades in a kind of a positive way, right? As if the Crusaders are sort of heroes going to, in order to, I don't know what Crusader is supposed to have doing, getting some kind of golden chalice, or I don't remember what we were told as kids the Crusaders were doing, but definitely they were good guys. And then in book 3, you know, there's you know, figures that Noor recognizes and automatically has an emotional reaction to, a sort of a visceral reaction to, that is, you know, difficult to communicate, you know, that just instantly happens, right? Like I've said before, if a kid is reading and the kid travels back in time and sees Abraham Lincoln, they sort of know instantaneously what the emotional salience of that is. Whereas in translation, it's not as clear what, you know, what is the emotional salience. So I think, you know, the pressure needs to be on Noor's reaction. And because we did talk about fleshing that out a little bit, explaining who these people are, but that seemed counterproductive in terms of the story moving along.
Yeah.
So I think the pressure needs to be in Noor's reaction to that.
Yeah, and it's seamless. So, you know, I wouldn't be able to tell what you kind of chose to emphasize or not, because it moves so beautifully. I have questions from my children.
And then I wanted to say one more thing, which is, and then I did hope that maybe kids would be curious, right?
Yeah.
They would be curious to see what is an alternative view of the Crusades that I didn't hear at my church or my school.
Yeah,
And
I of course went to the school that didn't teach it at all, so I don't even know. I mean, in whatever that means in India, or you know, you just all you did was like Indians fought the British, and that was just great, and onwards. You know, no, I wanted to I have 2 questions that come from both my kids who've read the trilogy. My 11-year-old daughter is also called Noor, and her question is, what is the symbolism of the Thunderbird? And then from my son, who's a little bit older, the question is, why does Noor go back in time and always meet her double? Why there's this doubling? Good
Okay,
question.
these are very good questions. Okay, for what's the symbolism? If you read, for example, Mahmoud Darwish, or if you read Samih al-Qasim, or some of the poets in Palestine, or some of the writers, they always refer to the Palestinians as phoenix. We had so many occupations coming to our country, and all of them, you know, tried to annihilate us, tried to, you know, finish us, and they left, and we're here. So the symbolism is that, like, okay, every occupation came. The Crusades came and they left. The Persians came and they left. Romans came and they left. You know, through history, we had so many occupations, if you like, but they all left, and we are still here. So we are like the phoenix, that we come from our own ashes, if you like, and we are reborn every time, and we're still here. You know, 120 years later, we're still fighting, and we're still here. And this is the symbolism. Again, the hero of the book actually is Jerusalem itself, because this is the line that, you know, connects, and Jerusalem itself is like the phoenix, because it's a very small town, by the way. It's not a huge town, Jerusalem, but it is, the symbolism of it. It's the forgot the word. Anyway, it's a symbol rather than, if you like, a thriving economic place. like Hebron, for example, or like Nablus, or like Jaffa. But again, it's been occupied so many times and then still alive. Why does Noor see a double, not a double, like a reflection of herself?
Mhm.
Okay, let me put it like philosophically. I didn't think about it then, by the way. Now I'm reflecting. Noor, through all these three trilogies, she went through also occupations. And it is her seeing occupation all over again, be it the Israelis in the first book, or the Crusades in the second book, or even the Bakosala, which are the these worm-like occupiers in the other creatures world. So it is like, if you like, Noor is the Palestinian, and she's the Palestinian in every part of history. I don't know if this makes sense, but that's why she has
An unbroken
exactly
heritage.
like her. And that's why at the end of the book, they all merge, to be her again. So this is her in every part of history, in every part of occupation, if you like.
Yeah. Marcia, where are you with the interpretations, answers to these questions?
This is a very good question, and I think your son has a future as a literary critic. That's my opinion.
Yeah. What was the process for both of you? Do you feel as a translator, Marcia, that you needed to work through all the interpretations and things like that? I know you're such a fine literary critic yourself as well, and an analyst. So how was the process, and did you all collaborate a lot, talk a lot?
I mean, each book has its own challenges. The third book is all these kind of creatures from another universe that we had to give names to. Although I guess in each book there are kind of these invented, kind of wondrous invented creatures that, to me, one of the most important parts was visualizing, was figuring out what do they look like? What is this gigantic bat-like creature where there's so many of them that they can obliterate the sky, and what is this kind of whack-a-mole creature that can, pound the bakosala as they come up out of their holes. And so to me, like an essential part was kind of drawing each of these things and understanding, the landscape historically, the clothes that people would wear, because I think in any book that you read, Catherine Holes talks about it as you need to know what the whole glacier is, right? You may not use actually any of this knowledge that you do research into. You may just, it may just appear that you've just translated this that's above the water, but you still want to know, like, what was that man wearing in this Crusades era? What was his haircut looking like? What were the smells? What was the food kept in? And I did ask Sonia questions about, about these kind of, because, she has access to more research and things than I do.
Yeah, lovely. Can we return to some depressing questions again? I know, Sonia, you said you're not going to write about children in Gaza anymore. You can't do it, or I don't know. Do you want to say what does it even mean? What are you working on? How do you keep going? Things are very extreme right now.
I'm surviving, not going, if you like. Literally. No, I can't write about children in Gaza. I can't write about the genocide, not yet. It's too early. It's too painful. You can't. If you do, it will become superficial and just, big words, which It's not me. What I'm going back to history. This is a curse or maybe a bless. I'm not sure. I'm an oral historian on one hand, but I'm a writer on the other hand, and these two always fight. That's why, for example, I kept asking when I wrote the trilogy whether the historian or the writer, they keep fighting. Everyone wants their space. And that's why we decided, with the book 3 with Marcia, that we're not going to explain history. We're going to let them, just figure it out. So at the moment, I just finished one book, which I decided to make it into maybe not a trilogy, but perhaps 4 or 5 books for children. And I started in the 20s of the last century in Palestine. This is where I started. Because also people think that when Palestinians were kicked out of Palestine, it was in Nakba 1948. But as a matter of fact, it isn't. When you talk about a minute ago, you talked about the Indians fighting against the British. But you know what the British did to get control of India economically? They tried to control lands by disintegrating the communal ownership of the lands. And this is what the early Israeli settlers or the early Jewish settlers, because they were not Israel then, this is what they did. They bought lands and they let the peasants actually leave their lands and become immigrants in Jaffa or in Haifa, trying to be unskilled laborers because all they know is land. So that began not only in 48, no, it began earlier than that, early 20s of the 20th century. So this is where I began. But I hope I will have enough breath and energy to finish the other books that come after. I'm following the life of one family.
Amazing. That sounds
Is
amazing.
Tamer publishing that?
No, I'm trying to find. I'm going to change now.
Okay.
I'm going to. I don't know. Maybe the Palestine مؤسسة الدراسات الفلسطينية. I
But you want to publish them in Palestine.
I'm not sure yet. Actually, I'm not sure. Book 1 is finished. I'm now doing research on book 2 because it's a huge research. So I'm not sure actually about anything at the moment, where I'm going to publish them, whether the publisher is going to be interested to have book 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know, because I'm covering something like 100 years of contemporary Palestinian history.
Amazing. Okay, that's great. I mean, I think I should invite folks to ask questions if they have. I guess one of the things I was thinking while people decide if they have questions to ask Sonia or Marsha was just to kind of how to push past the futility. I mean, it's like, what would you say, Sonia, as a Palestinian writer who is so resistant, so much activism, doing so much? What is your message to like all of us, who are not there, but who want to who want to be part of some way to do some kind of activism within the worlds of literature, publishing, translation, all these kinds of things. It's all starting to feel so crazy at some level. It's always feels slow, but it feels like it just feels particularly fraught or something. What is the kind of way in which you give us focus or?
And I can't tell you what to do, but I tell you one thing: speak out and spread the word. This is all what we can do. One of the things that in South Africa is the boycott you know, it helped. It pushed, actually. I mean, they were on the edge of the volcano, if you like. They're going down, but people in the world pushed them a little bit, and this is where the apartheid hopefully finished in South Africa. So what we need is to spread the word, and what we need is to speak out. I know that governments in the West, and generally, they don't allow people to. They gag them and they don't allow them to say anything. But then again, if 1,000 voices, they cannot sort of gag them. They cannot stop them. One voice maybe, but 1,000, 2,000 voices, a million voices cannot be stopped, cannot be shut up. And this is what we think. And you know, when I hear about all these student, for example, movements and campaigning, this gives us strength, and this is what we need, that our voice is heard.
Yeah.
And our voice is being spread by other voices. I mean, use my voice to spread the word. This is what I say. Publishing, I don't know, we still need maybe time to be, but it will come. I promise you that. Now people will start asking who these Palestinians are and how can they steadfast. I mean, how can they survive? How can they live? And people will ask these questions, and then people will read books about that, maybe in the near future.
Yeah, thank you.
So I would just promote, of course, the work that we're doing at Publishers for Palestine.
Yes.
Today we have this new letter out about refusing to participate with complicit Israeli literary organizations, and people can go to publishersforpalestine.org and sign this letter. We also have Read Palestine Week coming up November 29th through December 5th. We'll have a new publication ready for that week, and we're urging people this year not simply to read in a passive sense, but to read in an active sense, read in public, read out loud, make your voice heard. And we're working with a number of organizations, librarian and archivists with Palestine, etc., to spread this as much as possible, especially among students.
Absolutely. Do people have questions? Anybody, anything? Or Marsha, did you have something to ask, add? It's okay if one doesn't.
No, I mean, I just if I just remember this first time that I talked to Sonia, and she did talk about when she was in prison and about this moment when she decided she wanted to write for young readers, and I wanted to kind of relive that question because it's it was powerful for me at the time.
About what? Writing to children?
Yeah,
in
about
prison?
in prison, yeah.
Can I add to that that the manuscripts that were confiscated in prison were also children's stories? Have those
children's
made it
stories.
back? Have they made
No.
it back in some form? They're gone. Okay.
No, they used to have what they call random searches. So you know, you wake up in the morning, suddenly leave the room or leave the cell, and they're going to search everything and they confiscate everything. This is what happened. But what they confiscate, they never bring back. So I couldn't. I tried, but I couldn't rewrite those two stories in prison. Because afterwards, it's just this moment. But these stories are maybe one way to climb the wall and to go into the children worlds where it's brighter and it's innocent and it's not prison. And this is, I mean, when I say confiscating, this is one thing that I'm going to talk with you later on, Marsha, about book I'm working on, which is my experience in prison, which I'm daring to write now. But let me tell you, if I have 2 minutes.
Yes.
When in our prison yard, there was, of course, a wall, and of course, there is the barbed wire, 2 layers of barbed wire. But there was a jasmine tree, and it was the only bright thing that we loved. This jasmine tree that grew up on the land, and it climbed over the wall. So for us, it's the flowers of the jasmine tree. Not only was the smell and the brightness, but also it dared to look over the fence outside the prison. It's like a ladder to the freedom. But then they decided to cut it down, because anything that brings us pleasure should be cut down. So they brought the electric got the word
Chainsaw.
axe, jigsaw, and they killed it. I'm telling you this story, of course, in very short. And it lied down dead on the floor, and then the handyman in prison, just held the end of it, and he pulled it, and there was a trail of like white flowers on the floor, on the ground. And we were all crying. Actually, we were all really crying, because that was our only connection with freedom. It's the only thing that overlooks the other side of the wall. And then suddenly, and this is a true story, suddenly one of our comrades started to laugh, and we almost killed her, because, we crying for this dead jasmine tree, and this girl is laughing like hell. But when the guards left, and when the handyman took what's left of our jasmine tree, this girl, her name was Rasmiya, actually. She took a twig from her breast, from her prison uniform, and she showed it to us. It was a twig from the jasmine tree, but we planted it again. So this, it's like the phoenix, it's just this, this jasmine tree, which was our hope. But then again, we replanted the hope. And this is one of the things that I think made me think of children books or children's stories in prison. It's just hope.
Beautiful. Questions from anyone in the audience? Oh, we have comments. No questions. If there aren't more questions, I have one. I have one final question, though. It's lovely to end on the idea of hope. Sonia, what are the authors that inspire you? Who do you read?
Now or then or when?
I like a kind of timeless, like always.
I love Dr. Seuss, for example.
Okay.
I love Dahl. That is for children books, but
Roald Dahl,
yeah. But I like only the first book of Harry Potter. After that, I thought there is artificial interference. The first book was brilliant, but the other books were like, anyway, money machine.
Well, by the time they were like book 4, book 5, they were like 900 pages, and they were just repetition of dialogue.
Yeah, and I would imagine also 900 authors involving in making it into a Barbie children book, kind of. I don't know. I usually, when I like a writer, I go and read all his or her books. And then there is one book of this writer that will make me feel like, okay, I've had enough. I don't want to read anymore. So I don't have a favorite writer in such a way. I have favorite books, but apart from Dr. Seuss and Roald Dahl, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think you're taking it as just children's books, but you can talk even tell me more generally. You're also like a very serious writer and thinker, and I'm sure you read a lot. Who are some people you're always go to, always read, always inspired by?
There is not always. I mean, I told you. I mean, I
You
go
go through
for
phases.
example, when I was living in London, I had this. I was a fan of Isabel Allende. So I would go and read all her books. I was a fan of, what's his name? The guy who made Da Vinci Code. So I would go and, every time the book comes, this is how
Yeah, yeah.
it happens. Now I'm reading a book by Bassem Khandaqji. Bassem Khandaqji is a Palestinian prisoner who has something like 3 lifetime sentence, and who won the book award, the Arab book award, only in April. So now I'm reading his other novel. So I'm enjoying reading him at the moment.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, so he won the International Prize for Arabic Fiction, and I believe
Yes.
Europa has signed a translation of his book, which should come out in the next couple of years.
And Marsha,
Yeah, I hope. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I said, Marsha, do you have some like 1 or 2 books, like as someone with their translator hat on, like urgently need to be translated? You may not be able to do it, but like they must go out into the world today.
They must go out into the, well, I would say that you urgently must read Maya Abul Hayat's
All right.
It's translated by Hazem Jamjoum. Nobody knows their blood type. It is out now, and it's boundary breaking and absolutely original, and you must read it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Jacqueline says, thank you.
Wonderful to end on a note of hope and solidarity. Thank you. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thanks so much for sharing.
And I'm glad to see you all again.